So let me go on a diversion here slightly before we get back into politics, because I know that's the focus. But I'm curious about religion.
Sure.
You know, because religion is very emotional and a lot about metaphor, and is a way of explaining the world, and it makes us feel better, etc. My hope is that in the long run, we're going to realize that it's just not true, and that reason is going to win out as opposed to the emotions and our emotional needs for religion. Now, that hasn't happened yet, so I might very well be wrong. Does your research give us an answer to that? Give us an insight into that? Not an answer, but an insight into that?
Well, there are several things that we have found. First of all, there are 4 basic metaphors we have found so far for God. And they're classes of metaphors, not individual ones, whole classes. There's one where God is a father-like person, with special cases where God is a judge, God is a creator, God is a shepherd, and so on. Special cases of properties of fathers. Then you have the infinite cases, where God is the infinite, and that means God is all-knowing, all-good, the first cause, all-powerful. Right? So those are the 2. Those are the most common ones in the West. And then there are others that also show up in Western religions, less commonly, and also in other religions around the world. There is, God is the source of all good things. You know, you're not the source of all the wonderful things in your life, but you take that source as something else out there, and in certain religions, you might call it God. There's another one in which God is the physical world. So in the Kabbalah, for example, God is, you don't say God, do not say God is not in the stone, God is in the stone, God is in the tree. And this is in various variations on religion throughout the world. Now, those last 2 are interesting because they say that there are 2 kinds of things that are sacred. What does sacred mean? It means things of ultimate value. That the good things that happen to you in life are of ultimate value, and that the physical world is of ultimate value. And there are plenty of people who don't believe the first 2 metaphors and see themselves as atheists, but believe the last 2. And they wouldn't call it God, they wouldn't call themselves religious, but they might be, quote, spiritual. And when we have a lot of spiritual Americans who happen not to believe in the first 2 metaphors, and therefore see themselves as atheists. It's not clear what an atheist is.
So am I right in assuming then that it's possible that we could retain an emotional connection that is spiritual in nature, and still use our reason to be able to understand what is and is not, relatively speaking, true?
Our reason is metaphorical. All these things I mentioned are part of real reason. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying we're not using. The old view of reason is just false. Mm-hmm. We really reason in terms of frames and narratives and metaphors and things of that sort. That's the way it really works. And that gives rise to our moral systems. It gives rise to our political systems.
Does that make truth variable?
Truth has to do with understanding. That is, you can't say something is true or false if you don't understand what it is. But understanding depends on how you frame the situation, on the metaphors you bring to it, and the narratives you bring. So first, in order to ask about truth, you have to ask how you're framing the situation, how you're understanding it. Then you ask, does the fact about the situation, the real experience of it, fit your understanding? If it does, you say it's true. If it doesn't, you say it's false.
So the sky is only blue because we see it as blue. That is our frame. And so it seems true to us that the sky is blue, but
it's not. It's worse than that.
Okay.
It turns out that color isn't out there in the world. Color arises from 4 factors. 2 in the world, which is reflectances and lighting around an object, and 2 of them that are internal to you. Your retina has color cones of 3 kinds. They are connected neurally to color centers in the brain, and all of those together give rise to our colors. We don't experience, color isn't out there. And if what does it mean to be colorblind? It means that you lack one of those, kinds of color cones. In short, and not only birds have additional cones, and they see more dimensions of color than we do.
So color is in here and not out there.
It's not just in here, it's both. It's in the interaction.
Exactly. Okay, great. I love that. So now let's try to apply it to politics.
Right.
And I wish the Democrats had applied it to politics.
So do I.
Right. Now, one fundamental question is, how come the Republicans get this and the Democrats don't get this? Let's give that a shot.
There are 2 reasons together. The Republicans come out of a business environment where they use marketing. And for the past 35 years, they have been marketing their ideas day after day to the public very effectively through a system of think tanks, through a system of training institutes, through a messaging system that includes owning media and includes booking their experts on TV through a booking agency every day, where they have 80% of the talking heads are booked on TV around the country. They're all conservatives. The Democrats have nothing like this. They don't have this system at all. And they've known about it for 10 years. They haven't done anything effective to get their ideas out there. And part of the reason is that they still believe in the old view of reason. They still believe if you just tell people the facts, they'll reason to the right conclusion. What do you need? They see framing often as just spin. But spin is the use of framing by a fraud to try to cover up. Effective communication is the use of framing by somebody honest who knows what he's doing. I'm writing these books so that people can honestly know what they're doing and can distinguish spin from honest framing.
So, Professor Lakoff, Republicans come at politics from a marketing perspective, and we were saying in the last segment, and they sell their ideas. The Democrats have been losing for so long. At what point does their reason kick in? Or do they have an emotional need to lose? I mean, what is happening? Why don't they understand these obvious framing issues?
They went to college. That's a problem. It's a problem because if you went to college and you took Introduction to the History of Political Thought, you learned about Enlightenment reason. And you learned about this false view that says it's all conscious, it fits the world directly, if you tell people the facts, they'll reason to the right conclusion. All of that stuff lies behind the entire democratic policy framework. That's why you get interest group politics. They assume that everything is based on self-interest. But we now know from neuroscience that that's not so. An amazing thing was discovered in 1996 in Parma, Italy, that we have in our heads what are called mirror neurons. Neurons that fire when we either perform an action or we see someone else perform the same action. And that these are connected to our emotional regions in such a way that we can tell if someone else is happy or sad or in pain by looking at them, and then we can feel someone else's pain. Empathy is in there, wired in, and these fire more when you cooperate even than when you imitate. That is, we are hardwired for empathy and cooperation. And a lot of our reason is about caring for other people, caring about them, figuring out what they're about, understanding their emotional reactions, and connecting with them. And that is crucial in understanding how we really reason economically. Behavioral economics now has shown that in economic decision-making, real people use frames and narratives and metaphors.